kathamritam tapta jivanam kavibhiriritam kalmashapaham Sravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Bhurida Jana. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, advice to the Brahmos. So, Sri Ramakrishna's conversation is continuing. Ramlal is singing and Sri Ramakrishna is raptly, attentively listening to the song and he is going into Samadhi. So Ramlal sang again, this time describing the pangs of the gopis on being separated from their beloved Krishna. Hold not the chariot's wheels. Is it the wheels that make it move? The mover of its wheels is Krishna, by whose will the worlds are moved. The master went into deep samadhi. His body was motionless. He sat with folded hands as in his photograph. Tears of joy flowed from the corners of his eyes. After a long time, his mind came down to the ordinary plane of consciousness. He mumbled something of which only a word now and then could be heard by the devotees in the room. He was saying, "Thou art I, and I am thou." Continuing, the master said, "I see everything like a man with jaundiced eyes. I see thee alone, everywhere, O Krishna, friend of the lowly, O eternal consort of my soul, O Govinda." So that's the thing, that after listening to this song, he is getting inspired by that song, and in the same theme of the song, he is just saying that what he's saying, that thou art I and I am thou. So this in the spiritual evolution is called tadakara karita. That the more you get absorbed in the divine, you find that you and the divine are inseparable. It's the divine who is working through you. You are just the channel for the divine to flow. He flows through your life, and everything, your total vision gets transformed. Everything you see is nothing but the divine and divine alone. As we find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the same idea is there, that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes down from the Samadhi, what he says? Jatra jatra netra pare, tatra tatra Krishna's fure. That wherever my eye falls, I see the Krishna is as if blooming, popping from each and every entity of this existence. So that's the idea, even in the Upanishads, the Isha Upanishads, that's what it starts with. Isha vasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. That you have to deify the world with the Lord and Lord alone. He is the one who is pervading the entire existence. When you see the Lord in the entire existence, then there is no demarcation of the secular and the spiritual life. Everything becomes spiritual because you are interacting with the divine all the time, because you are seeing the divine in each and every moment of your life, in each and every act, in each and every moment, in each and every thought is a divine and divine alone, which is manifesting through your life. So that's the idea. So we find that an ignorant person, when he goes to Samadhi, that's what Swami Vivekananda used to say, what's the difference between deep sleep and Samadhi? A fool goes to the state of deep sleep, comes back as a fool. a fool enters into the state of samadhi and he returns as a wise man. His total way of looking at the world has changed. There's a total overhauling of the personality. So that's when he comes down from the samadhi, that's called in our literature as vyutthana. You're coming down from that, coming back from samadhi. Then you are a total changed person. Your vision has changed. Is the Lord and Lord alone which you see in the entire existence. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. That his eyes become like a jaundiced eye. When we have that jaundice, when anyone gets inflicted with jaundice, he sees yellow everywhere. That's one of the symptoms of jaundice. His eyes, because of that excessive bilirubin secretion, everything appears, the eyes become yellow, and even whatever I see looks yellow. So that's the example Sri Ramakrishna is giving, that your vision changes. Just the way a jaundiced patient sees everything yellow, a man of realization sees the Lord everywhere. As he uttered the words, eternal consort of my soul and Govinda, the master again went into samadhi. So as we find, Sri Ramakrishna himself is indicating that a realized soul's mind is just like a dried matchstick. For a worldly person, the mind is just like a wet matchstick. It is drenched in worldliness. So that's why we may go on striking it. It doesn't ignite. But for a man of realization, for whom renunciation has become spontaneous, detachment is something spontaneous. He is like a dried matchstick. The worldliness cannot wet him, cannot drench him. As a result, we find even a little indication of some subtle thoughts immediately illumines his mind, immediately inspires him, illumines him, takes him to a deep absorption, as if transforms him to a different level of awareness, consciousness. He goes to an altered state of awareness. That's what we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna again and again. His mind was like a dried matchstick. It was very quick to ignite with the slightest spark. Just the word, eternal consort of the soul, the Govinda, immediately goes into samadhi. There was a complete silence in the room. The eager and unsatiated eyes of the devotees were fixed on the master, a God-man of infinite moods. Adhar Sen arrived with several of his friends. He was a deputy magistrate, about 30 years old. This was his second visit to the master. He was accompanied by his friend Sharadacharan, who was extremely unhappy because of the death of his eldest son. A retired deputy inspector of schools, Sharadacharan, devoted himself to meditation and prayer. Adhar had brought his friend to the master for consolation in his afflicted state of mind. Coming down from samadhi, the master found the eyes of the devotees fixed on him. He muttered to himself, still in an abstracted mood, "Worldly peoples lack perseverance." Then addressing the devotees, Sri Ramakrishna said, "The spiritual wisdom of the worldly people is seen only on rare occasions. It is like the flame of a candle. No, it is rather like a single ray of the sun passing through a chink in a wall. Worldly people chant the name of God, but there is no zeal behind it. It is like children swearing by God, having learned the word from the quarrels of their aunts. Worldly people have no grit. If they succeed in an undertaking, it is all right. But if they don't succeed, it scarcely bothers them at all. When they need water, they begin to dig a well, but as soon as they strike a stone, they give up digging there and begin at another place. Perhaps they come to a bed of sand. Finding nothing but sand, they give that place up too. How can they succeed in getting water unless they continue to dig persistently where they started?" So that's the idea of perseverance, which we find Sri Ramakrishna is highlighting. That in spiritual life, unless we have perseverance, the tremendous grit, resilience to stick on to the practice, whatever may be my temperament, whatever may be my mood, whatever may be the state of mind, I took a resolve that just when my mood is okay, then only I go for my spiritual practice, otherwise not. No. I've taken the resolution. In whatever state my mind may be, I will try to focus my mind in the definite hours of the day, in meditation, in deep absorption. That's the perseverance. Without that perseverance, there cannot be any spiritual development. That's why Swamiji used to say the entire spiritual journey can be described by 3P: purity, patience, perseverance. Purity is our attempt to keep the mind in sublime thought. The mantra which we have got from our spiritual teacher, from our spiritual predecessor, from our spiritual precept. And then what we do? We try to contemplate on the divine, resorting to the repetition of that name. Whatever may be if my mind is distracted, still I don't stop my practice. If I am not feeling like doing it, still, while as has been instructed, I do it again and again and again and again. That's the way to develop devotion. As again in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, very nicely it has been mentioned, that you say, always the spiritual teacher says that have devotion for the divine, have love for God, but I don't feel love. Love is not something which can be forced. If I don't feel, how can I love God? And then we find that wonderful instruction. Ei Harinam Nite Nite Bhakti Mukul Phutibe Chite. That go on taking the name of the Lord. The devotion is in the form of a bud in your heart. In time it will bloom. So you may not feel that love for God, but this is the way. Even if you don't feel the love, go on repeating His name, know it for certain. In time, the devotion will well up from the bottom of your heart. So that's why this perseverance is very much required in spiritual life. Purity is the repetition, trying to keep the mind in sublime thought. And for that we have to have perseverance, go on practicing. And the result is not going to come in a day. We have to have patience. Purity, patience, perseverance. That's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating in his conversation. Man reaps the harvest of his own past actions. Hence, you read in the song, O Mother, I have no one else to blame. Alas, I sink in the well these hands have dug. These very hands have dug. I and mine, that is ignorance. By discriminating, you will realize that what you call I is really nothing but Atman. Reason it out. Are you the body or the flesh or something else? At the end, you will know that you are none of this. You are free from attributes. So, the first thing what he is saying, Sri Ramakrishna, that I sink in the well these very hands have dug. So what actually is indicated by these words? That how we have got obsessed by all our worldly desires. I thought that my endeavor for wealth, for having relations, for having name and fame in life, these were the be-all and end-all my existence. And we don't know how long we were chasing after this, thinking them to be the necessity. And in the process of repetition, we thought them to be the necessity, without which the life has no meaning. I was chasing after them for lives together. And that has created a deep groove. Because of the repetition, it has as if created a deep groove in my mind. And now I am obsessed. I forget the necessity. Just to do it has become my liking. I am obsessed by it. Even if I feel it is harming me, it is again and again. It is becoming the cause of my suffering. But still I cannot leave it. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that what's the fate of the worldly people like is just like a camel feeding on the thorny bushes. It goes and feeds on the thorny bush. It bleeds because of the thorn, but it still continues to feed on the thorny bushes. He says that's the condition of the worldly people. They suffer because of their worldly entanglements, but they cannot leave it. They cannot learn from their past experiences. Goes on repeating the same thing again and again because of that tremendous obsession. Our condition is just like a bee which sat on the honey to suck the honey, and then it finds its wings have got stuck in the honey. It cannot fly. That's what our condition is. So we chased after it, and then it has got hold of us. There's a nice, the story, a parable, which says an interesting thing, that one day a monk while having a dip in the bank of the river, saw in the mid of the river a blanket is just drifting away, is flowing. With the water it is drifting off. So now this monk thought, this sadhu thought, oh, in winter I need that blanket. Let me get it. And then he swam to the middle of the river to get hold of that blanket which was flowing. And then the people on the bank saw that the sadhu, the monk, even after getting hold of the blanket, was not coming back. It was as if carried by the blanket. The blanket is as if dragging him. Actually, he was deluded. So he actually got hold of a crocodile, thinking it a blanket. This on the back of the crocodile, that it looked like appeared like a blanket, and it went and actually got hold of the crocodile, and now the crocodile is taking it to the deep waters. So when these people from the bank shouted, "What are you doing? Why don't you come back?" And the sadhu's reply was, this kambal mujhe chhodta nahi. That I am trying to get rid of this blanket is carrying me away, is taking me to the deep waters. Then these people told, why don't you leave it? Well, I have left it, but it is not releasing me, because it's after a crocodile. So the idea is what? That all the worldly desires is like that crocodile. Thinking it's something to be beneficial for me, I try to get hold of it, and at last it gets hold over me. And then that makes us suffer. Even if we find that it is something not serving any purpose, I cannot leave it. And that's the idea Sri Ramakrishna is narrating with the help of that song, that line. What is that? Alas, I sink in the well these very hands have dug. So how it has been dug, how it has happened? I and mine, that is ignorance. There's all these obsessions, how it developed. The moment the conscious principle got associated with the body-mind complex, the ego developed. I. The moment the ego developed, the next evolutes are raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Anything which is favorable. Now, as I think my body-mind complex to be my identity, seeing the reflection of the consciousness in the body-mind complex, I take that to be, that reflection to be my identity. And that's how I get attached to the body-mind complex. Now, anything which is favorable for this body-mind complex, I get drawn towards it. Anything which is not favorable, I develop fight and flight response. So all these attachments, even hatred is a negative attachment. As I am in love of my own life, that's why I hate something which is detrimental for it. Even hatred is an attachment. So all these attachments which I have developed through the entire process of evolution, behind it, what is there? This I and mine. Ahamta, mamata. Because of that, all these, our various mental desires, sanskaras have developed. So that's what he's saying. I and my, that is the ignorance. I am always ever fulfilled. But because I take the reflection to be my reality, because of ignorance, all this suffering has entailed from that. So as the beginning of it is this ego, I and my, that is the ignorance. By discriminating, you will realize what you call I is really nothing but Atman. So when at last I realize that I am the self, I am not this body-mind complex. Through the process of discrimination, I start disidentifying myself, segregating myself from these 5 layers of wrong identification. That's the Panchakosha, the idea of 5 sheaths. Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha. One by one, through the discrimination, I try to get rid of them. At last, what remains? The Atman alone abides. When I get rid of these layers, the self alone abides. So this idea, again and again we find in the scriptures, that get rid of this false identification, which is the cause of all your suffering. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that I and my, that is ignorance. By discriminating, you will realize that what you call I is really nothing but Atman. Reason it out. Are you the body or the flesh or something else? So what's the way of reasoning? The 2 things. That something within me is always echoing 2 things. That I am eternal. No one can think of his own death. Impossible. Even if you read the life of Raman Maharshi, very interesting. As a child, the first illumination, how it came? He was contemplating on his own death, and then suddenly it flashed. Who is seeing my death? This my own death. I am seeing. When I am thinking of my own death, what I am seeing? My body is lying motionless, as if no life is there. My near and dear ones are surrounding me, and they are all driven by abject, most probably they are weeping or they are in abject sorrow. Now who is watching all those things? I, as if separate from my body, am watching my own body and all the relatives surrounding. Who is watching? I am watching. So there is no one annihilation of this me, the real I, the one who is watching. So this is the idea which the scriptures in various ways try to explain. That after all we will find that these 2 things we can never get rid of. That I want to be eternal because that's my real nature. I am eternal. And that I want to realize through this body-mind complex. And another thing, I want fulfillment through the satiation of my desires. Why? Because again the self is ever fulfilled. Because of ignorance, because of its identity with the body-mind complex, something behind is saying you're eternal, you're fulfilled. And I don't realize through the body-mind complex. And that's why this eternal chase for eternity and fulfillment is going through the body-mind complex. Now you just, when the knowledge dawns, what you do? That something within that I am is eternal, is ever fulfilled. But is the body eternal? Is it having any sense of fulfillment? No. It's constantly mutating, changing. How can it be eternal? Same with the pranamaya kosha. Sometimes we are in good health, sometimes we are sick. As a young person, we are full of energy. As we get old, our vitality starts dwindling. Manomaya kosha, the mind constantly vacillating. Vijnanamaya kosha, this is our intellect. Again, that is, we find is not something constant. So all these koshas speak of flow, but something behind me is constantly asserting the fact that I am not the flow. I am. Do I ever feel that I as a small child was a different I from the I who am now? The same I. Everything has changed. The body has changed. My thought process has changed. But the I amness behind it is something the same, perpetual, ever unchanging. So if you go through analysis one by one, discriminating your body, your mind, your intellect, at last what you find? That Swasangvedya Chaitanya, the subjective experience of amness. That's something which unadulterated is always there. Its association with the body-mind complex is the reason for all the dualities in life. The moment we discriminate, we find that all the dualities has been resolved. It is as it is in the eternal present. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying there. That why discriminating? At last what you find? Are you the body? Are you the mind? No. What remains at last is the Atman and Atman alone. Reason it out. Are you the body or the flesh or something else? At the end, you will know that you are none of this. You are free from all these attributes. So, then you will realize that you have never been the doer of any action. So once you identify the self, then you find that it is the self when it comes in association with the mind. In the process of evolution, various mental modules have developed. How? The same example, that when the conscious principle gets associated with the body-mind complex and it starts thinking that I am this body-mind complex, but something behind it is echoing that you are eternal. Its chase for eternity makes it get attached to something which is favorable for its limited existence, and to develop this fight and flight response for all the things which is not favorable for his existence. And this responses in the form of raga, in the form of dvesha abhinisha, in the form of this attachment, in the form of hatred and fear. It goes on creating innumerable mental modules, sanskaras. For something I get drawn, for there are certain things I develop attachment, there are certain things I develop hatred, I develop fear. And these innumerable mental modules have fixed stimuli response conditioning. As per the circumstance in which I am placed, a particular module gets activated, and that module has a fixed stimuli response conditioning. I am bound to respond to the circumstance in a particular way, but the mind is constituted in such a way, the language brain, the propaganda machine makes us feel that it is I who am deciding. Throughout our life, is I am not the doer. It is a mental module which has been activated, and as per the fixed stimuli response conditioning, it will respond, making me believe that it is I who have chosen to act in a particular way. Not only that, I try to explain the world. It is my decision. But when a man of realization at last has got associated with the self by detaching himself from the body, from the mind, from the intellect, then what happens? All these mental modules, they have no hold on him. They start falling off, and then he realizes he was never the doer. He is the unchanged, by his consent everything was happening, but by his association, in his association everything was happening, but he was as such, the self, unconditioned self, sitting there in his own glory without getting affected by what's going on in this world, because of the interaction of the body-mind complex with the world. Nothing is affecting him. He is actually he's sitting on the bank of the river, seeing the flow of the river. He's just a spectator. Previously, when he was identified with the body-mind complex, he was as if flowing in the river along with the stream. Now he has realized that he is not this body-mind complex. So he's, with his awareness, he's sitting on the bank and seeing the flow. And that's how he realizes that he's not the doer. The body-mind complex, by getting associated with this conscious principle, develops all these mental modules, and as per the situation, a particular mental module getting activated takes the decision. Our samskaras takes the decision, not the self. The self is just witnessing. It is in no way the doer. Once I get identified with the self, this idea that I am the karta, that falls off. So that is the thing which is being indicated by Guru Maharaj. What he's saying, then you realize that you have never been the doer of any action, that you have been free from virtue and faults alike, that you are beyond righteousness and unrighteousness. So the virtue and vice they all fall off. How? Sri Ramakrishna in some other context gives that wonderful example that the sunlight is illuminating everything. In the same light, someone is reading the scripture and someone else is counterfeiting the coins. Someone is doing some holy act, someone is doing some sinful act. But does the sun get affected in any way by the holy act of this holy person and the sinful act of this one who is counterfeiting the coins? No. Its duty is just to give the light. So that's what he's saying, that sin, virtue and vice doesn't in any way affect the self. It is beyond that. Because all this duality comes only when we get identified with the body-mind complex. Beyond that, we have transcended all the dualities of life in the form of virtue and faults. You are beyond this righteousness and unrighteousness. So that's the idea which Sri Ramakrishna is highlighting here. So then what he's saying, reasoning stops when one sees God. But there are instances of people who have realized God and who still continue to reason. Again, there are people who even after having seen God, chant His name with devotion and sing His glories. How long does a child cry? So long as it is not sucking at its mother's breast. As soon as it is nursed, it stops crying. Then the child feels only joy, joyously drinks the milk from its mother's breast. But it is also true that while drinking, the child sometimes plays and laughs. It is God alone who has become everything. But in man, He manifests Himself the most. God is directly present in the man who has pure heart of a child and who laughs and cries and dances and sings in divine ecstasy. So what's the idea? That in our spiritual journey first comes absorption. The more we are absorbed in the thought of the divine, the more the other activities starts falling off. And this absorption at last, when it takes to the realization, then all our reasoning stops. There cannot be any reasoning when you have realized. Realization alone is knowledge. When we are reasoning, that speaks of we are yet to attain that knowledge. Because once you know a certain thing, there is no question of reasoning. I have perceived something. I have realized something, from where the question of reasoning comes. So knowledge alone is realization. So when you go to the realization, then what happens? All your argument stops. That example which we give again and again. That suppose a person who have tested a mango and he goes and explains the taste of mango to a group of people who have never tasted mango. He says mango is sweet and it has a nice flavor. Now those who have not tasted the mango, they go on discussing that what the taste of mango is like. They try to relate his words with their available fund of experiences. Some say mango is sweet like molasses. It has a nice fragrance of the jasmine. Some says no, it is as sweet as honey. It has the fragrance of a tuberose. So like that you find there are varied opinions, discussion, fight. So among all those people who have not tasted the mango, but they are trying to analyze through reasoning what the taste is, all the fight, all the tension has developed between them, difference of opinion. So among that group of people, one of them by chance gets a mango to test. He tests. Before testing, he also was quarreling with others about the taste of mango. But the moment he tests, what happened? For the first time he realizes the one who first spoke about the taste of mango have never told something false. It was correct. But why all this discussion ensued from it? Because the one who have heard of it, they have not tested. They were simply using the reasoning to find out the test without testing it. The moment you test, now all your arguments stop because you have realized. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that when you get totally absorbed in the divine and it takes you to the realization, it's just like a small child. First it was crying because it was hungry, and then when it starts feeding on the mother's milk, it's silent. And when it is almost full, you will find, though it's drinking, but it starts mumbling. So nice example Sri Ramakrishna is giving. What's the idea? A realized soul becomes silent. But then when he comes down, seeing the people ignorant of the immense treasure which is lying deep within us, they are ignorant about that. The bliss which lies in the bottom of our heart, they're ignorant about that. So out of compassion, out of this unconditional love for the humanity, he comes down to relate his experience to the people. So that's why he's saying a baby crying stops crying when it's feeding on mother's milk, and then again it may start mumbling. What though now it is full, its stomach is full, he himself is satiated. Now he wants to relate his joy to the other people. So that's the idea which Sri Ramakrishna, with that example, is trying to relate. That a man of realization, for him all argument stops. If he has to talk again, he becomes silent. But if he has to talk again, it is because of his unconditional love for the humanity. He comes down to relate his experience so that others also can become the partaker of that bliss, can become the inheritor of that. They can also inherit that bliss, which is their own nature, to become one with that, to inherit that. Actually, it is not the question of inheritance, it is already there. They were somehow forgetful about it. To make them again aware of the source of bliss, which is within their heart. So he again starts speaking. So that's the thing with this example Sri Ramakrishna is trying to indicating. But there are instances of people who have realized God and who still continue to reason. Again, there are people who even after having seen God, chant his name with devotion and sing his glories. So why they do it? To show the humanity a way. They have realized they do no more there is need for them to practice. Because as Gautam Buddha used to say, no one carries the raft in his shoulder after crossing the river. Its purpose has been done. So all the spiritual practices are like the raft. It helps us to cross this ocean of worldliness. After that, it is not required. It is not required for them. But they may keep the raft for others to cross this ocean of humanity. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. So for them, there is no need of raft. But instead of destroying it, they keep it so that others also can use it to cross this river of worldly existence. So they have realized God and still continue to reason. Again, there are people who even after having seen God, chant his name with devotion and sing his glories. How long does a child cry? So long as it's not sucking at its mother's breast. As soon as it nursed, it stops crying. Then the child feels only joy. Joyously drinks the milk from its mother's breast. But it is also true that while drinking, the child sometimes plays and laughs. It is God alone who has become everything. But in man, he manifests himself the most. God is directly present in the man who has the pure heart of a child, and who laughs and cries and dances and sings in divine ecstasy. When your mind becomes clear, it becomes the perfect instrument for the God's reflection. A pure soul is just like a mirror in which the God, as it is, gets reflected. As we find, even in the Bible, it's mentioned that God has made man in his own image. So what's the idea? That as a human being, we have the capacity to realize the divine in our life. And how is it possible? By making our mind pure. So it becomes like a clean mirror in which you see the proper reflection of the divine. And then he becomes just like God. His life becomes full of that perpetual bliss. And that bliss finds expression through his life. Just like a child, it laughs, it cries and dances and sings in divine ecstasy. Happiness becomes something, a present tense. It is always with him. For us, happiness is always a future tense. That as a child, our parents used to say, study, then you will be happy. When we went, because of study, we went to some good schools. Still study so that you can go to a good uni. Then you will be happy. So you will find that always happiness is something ahead of us. We never can get it. When I'm in the uni, again, study, endeavor so that you can get a good job. If you get a good job, you will be happy. When I get a good job, now try to get married. If you're married, you will be happy. Have children, then you will be happy. So you'll find always we are keeping the happiness always in the future. But a man of realization is just like a small child. That the joy which is welling from the bottom of his heart, which is the essence of his existence, it is always with him. And he becomes like a small child. There is no reason for a child to be happy. Each and every small, silly act makes it happy. Because happiness is something which is welling from his heart. He is yet to develop the idea that the fulfillment of this desire and that desire will make me happy. His life itself speaks of bliss because happiness is the core of our existence. So a realized soul becomes like the child. It sings, it dances, it weeps, everything, whatever it does in the name of God. So in the ecstasy of the divine love, he does all these acts. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. By this time, Sri Ramakrishna has become better acquainted with Adhar, who related the cause of his friend's grief. The master sang as if to himself, to arms, O man! Death storms your house in battle array. Bearing the quiver of knowledge, mount the chariot of devotion. Bend the bow of your tongue with the bowstring of love, and aim at him the shaft of Mother Kali's holy name. Here is a ruse for the fray. You need no chariot or charioteer. Fight your foe from the Ganges bank, and he is easily slain. So they're using some allegories in this song to explain that love is important, not just the repetition of the name. Repetition of name with anuraga, with love. So that bend the bow of your tongue with the bowstring of love. That's important. The mother's name is the shaft, but unless you can bend it with the love, that bow is of no use. So that's why they're saying that repetition with love. Develop that tremendous love for the divine. That alone can take you to that realization. And why he's singing this is very interesting. The other's friend has came because he has lost his child. Generally what we do, we try to console the person in such a situation who is full of sorrow. Sri Ramakrishna never follows that path. What he does, immediately he starts singing an inspiring song where we find it is accepting that death, disease, death, these are facts of life. Don't get dejected by them, weighed down by them. Because nothing can touch the real me, the spiritual dimension of existence, that can nothing can touch it, nothing can tarnish it. So these are the moments when the spiritual dimension of our existence would open up. That's why you will find when someone dies, in all the congregations, what we do? We try to think of the divine. We read the Gita, where the idea that this body is just like a cloth for the self. The cloth we change, we wear a new cloth. But the self is the one who is the unchanging. The clothes may change, there may be various bodies. So all these ideas in Bhagavad Gita, in Upanishads, it's there. So when someone dies, why we chant it? Because that's the time when we lose someone. We took the life to be granted, and suddenly someone near the life came to an end, as if we are standing in the edge of a huge precipice. That big question mark comes. What's life after all? What's the purpose of it? That with all our relations end, all our days of happiness, so-called happiness ends, then is there any purpose of life? This big question mark comes then. And that's the time, if we are fortunate enough, that the spiritual dimension of our existence opens up. That portal opens up. So these are the moments where, instead of getting drowned in the abject sorrow, if we have a little inkling for that spiritual dimension, that to get attuned to the spiritual dimension of existence, these moments can actually help us to spirally move outwards, instead of getting more and more bound in all those dualities of life. It can help us to move outwards. The big question mark comes. What after all is life for? Unless we get identified with the spiritual dimension of existence and can transcend this so-called life of duality, where this jara vyadhi mrityu is the fact of life. This old age, disease, death. No one can avoid it. Today or tomorrow we all are going to go through this process. Our near and dear ones are going through that process. Unless and until we are equipping ourselves with our spiritual knowledge, there is no way we can transcend this suffering. It is going to drown us again and again. So that's why we find Sri Ramakrishna never consoles that person. That's what we do. In any way, he's trying to alter his consciousness and take it to that high level of the divine awareness, where the so-called all this worldly our entanglements, that falls off. Just like a bird, we are flying high up in the sky of this spirituality, from where everything appears to be so insignificant. So when we are moving in this so-called the streets of the city, the skyscrapers appears to be this high-rise building appears to be so high. But when I'm on a plane, everything appears to be like a matchbox, insignificant. A high building, a small building, everything becomes insignificant. Why? So we have raised ourselves to such a height from where everything becomes insignificant. This is the example even Sri Ramakrishna gives, that in his days in Calcutta, that octernary monument was there. It is still there. That's a huge monument. And the tourists were allowed to go to the top of it. Now they don't allow, because it has become a bit fragile. So it's very risky to go up. But in those days, the tourists were allowed to go on the top. And once you go to the top, everything is to appear so small, insignificant. And Sri Ramakrishna is giving that example in some other context. That as you go to the height of this octernal monument, everything becomes so insignificant. So that's what he's trying to do. He's taking him to the heights of the spiritual awareness, from where all this loss appears no loss at all. where we find we are always established in that spiritual identity, where there is no question of death, there is no question of impermanence. It is as it is. So that's the idea Sri Ramakrishna is doing, taking him to that different level of awareness. Immediately he started singing that song, so that that person who was extremely dejected, he immediately finds that inspiration, and immediately finds that identification with his self. So that's the idea which we find with Sri Ramakrishna is trying to highlight here. He's trying to inspire that person with this idea that equip yourself with the spiritual dimension of your existence. To arms, O man. Death storms your house in battle array. Bearing the quiver of knowledge, mount the chariot of devotion. Bend the bow of your tongue with the bowstring of love, and aim at him the shaft of Mother Kali's holy name. So that's how you get identified with the spiritual dimension of existence. Here is a ruse for the fray. You need no chariot or the charioteer. Fight your foe from the Ganges bank, and he is easily slain. Knowledge and devotion enables us to relate to this spiritual dimension of our existence. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. Master consoles a bereaved father. Then he said, "What can you do? Be ready for death. Death has entered the house. You must fight him with a weapon of God's holy name. God alone is the doer. I say, O Lord, I do as thou doest through me. I speak as thou speakest through me. I am the machine and thou art the operator. I am the house and thou art the indweller. I am the engine and thou art the engineer. Give your power of attorney to God. One doesn't come to grief through letting a good man assume one's responsibilities. Let his will be done." So here we will find that the prayer is not to change the circumstances, but to reorient our attitude as per the circumstances. The life is a flow. We cannot hold it, grab it. It is always flowing. And we should be always aware of the fact that because of ego, I feel I am the doer, but it is the Lord who is working through me. That I am just a pain in the hand of the divine. He is writing. For that the credit goes to him. The script of my life is written by him. The credit goes to him. I am just the pain in his hand. So if that is the case, then why should I try to why should I get attached by thinking I am the doer? All the attachment comes from the idea that I am the doer. All the attachment comes that I am the doer. So naturally it is I who deserve to enjoy the results of my action. If I know that I am not the doer, it is God who is working through me. He is the doer. The question of enjoying the results of action doesn't come. That's how that leads to. The moment I know that I am not the doer and I resign myself to the divine, the detachment comes naturally, spontaneously. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating here. So that everything is in the God's hand. Our birth, our death, we cannot decide on that. It's all part of the divine game, His plan. So there, unless we know it and stop trying to grab the flow and just surrender to the will of the divine, there cannot be any happiness in life. The real happiness comes from that surrender. So that's the thing here we find Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. Prayer is not to change the circumstances. We use prayer as if to change the circumstances. I am in a very dejected mood. I am in a situation where I find that as if everything is falling apart. I pray to God, "Oh God, please see that I can come out from all this misery and attain some happiness in this life." That's what all we try to change the circumstances. But Sri Ramakrishna here is indicating that the real prayer is in surrender. That, O God, thy will be done. I cannot change the destiny just by mere wishing, by having some sweet dream. I can never change. Man proposes, God disposes. Life flows in its own rhythm. I have no hand over it. So the best way to be happy is to resign and say, O God, thy will be done. And that also in thy way, in your way. When we say, O God, thy will be done, someone silently within us say, in my way. I say God will be done, but someone is saying in my way. That whatever I wish, accordingly God is going to do. No, not that way. God's will be done in God's way. And that is the pure resignation. When we can do that, then nothing can touch us. All the things I know is happening by the will of the Lord. From that conviction comes, from that type of surrender. And that's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that your son has passed away. We don't know the will of the God, why it has happened. It may appear that it is a cruel act. But that's why Sri Ramakrishna is giving another nice example. That sometimes, that a child has become orphan. In a village, a child has become orphan. So the villagers, they all sit together to decide that someone should be an attorney. Someone should be given the power of attorney. That he should be the trustee of this child's wealth. Child's father most probably kept a lot of wealth when he died. This child inherits. But as he's a small child, he doesn't have the sense of responsibility. How to handle that he doesn't know. So the villagers, they all decide that someone should be given the power of attorney. He will be just the trustee. Till the child grows, he will take care of the child, help and try to educate him, nourish him. And when the child grows, then all the property which he was just the caretaker, he now delivers to that person. So that's the idea of this power of attorney. That what Ramakrishna is saying, that in the village, the villagers always choose a person, a good person, who can be trusted. That's why the word trustee. The one who can be trusted is a trustee, a good person. And God is the real good. All the goodness originates from Him. And in our life, when something so-called bad happens, and if I blame God, that shows that I don't believe in God. He is the source of ultimate goodness. Everything has a reason which I don't understand by my limited way of understanding. But God knows best. He is doing everything with a purpose. I may not understand, but I should have that faith that He is the best person. So I should, just the way, that for the child, someone has been given the power of attorney. We have to give the power of attorney to God and say, thy will be done. I have resigned myself to you. That's the only way we can find happiness in life. Otherwise, we'll be just complaining again and again. So that's the thing, just such a nice way. A grieving man comes and just see how Sri Ramakrishna is trying to uplift his mood and trying to use that occasion to transform his so-called mundane awareness into the spiritual awareness. He's using this particular circumstance to help him to grow in spirituality. So that's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is doing. So after saying that, again he will say something, that this grief is natural, but still, that is not that you can simply deny it. But in spite of that grief, these are the situations in life where one has to try to relate to the spiritual dimension of existence. Because these are the time when it makes us think, we are standing on the edge of the precipice. It makes us think that what's the purpose of life? And we should take the full advantage of this situation. Instead of drowning deep in agony, we should use this situation to rise up to the spiritual heights and get established in the spiritual dimension of our existence. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna will continue on those lines. We will take up the remaining portion again in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskars.